I started the UK Cannabis Social Clubs in 2011. I've got Crohn's disease, and basically that means I've got an autoimmune disease. My immune system basically just tries to attack my digestive system and leaves me in a lot of pain. I can't eat food, my appetite is turned off, I get nausea, I'm vomiting constantly, I'm having diarrhea, going to the toilet 20 times a day. You try and live a normal life like that, you can't. And that was while I was going through my sort of like high school years, through sixth form and university. And I casually used cannabis. I was a musician, an artist, and you know, you get past the, you know, try this out, and or you know, someone's got a joint at a gig or something like that, and you smoke it, and you know, you're like, oh yeah, that's nice, I like that. But my cousin sort of introduced it to me, and sort of like, you know, a little bit more intimately, gave me a little bit more understanding about it. And I've never really had sort of like what I would term as sort of like a recreational, you know, relationship with cannabis. It's just been a use experience of cannabis. I've just liked using it. I've never termed it as medical or recreational. It was just cannabis to me. And it was only sort of like when I sort of really got into the needing to use it as a medicine that the idea of recreational cannabis sort of like entered my sort of like sphere. So I'm going to go into a little bit of that today as well. But so at university, I decided that I was going to stop using cannabis when I moved in with my girlfriend, and my illness just suddenly came out of nowhere. I hadn't been diagnosed yet, and I had a few ums and ahs about my illness. It wasn't so great. I'd been to the doctors back and forth for about 8 years and not been diagnosed, been given a bunch of different medications that didn't work for me, and finally got diagnosed with Crohn's after stopping cannabis for about 4 or 5 months, and still hadn't put together that, oh, I've stopped using cannabis and my illness has come out. And I did a bit of research online thinking maybe cannabis use caused my Crohn's. You know, I've read so much about it in the newspapers. This was all around the time that cannabis was being reclassified as well, so there was loads of anti-skunk, anti-cannabis media going on through the newspapers. So in my mind I was like, damn, maybe I've done this to myself. And I actually came across information saying, no, cannabis is a medicine, it actually really helps Crohn's. But I was also seeing things like turmeric really helps Crohn's, and cucumbers and celery. And so I was like, you know what, I've tried all that as well, and none of that worked, so I'm not going to try the cannabis again. And I suffered for another year, and my health fluctuated a little bit, and it wasn't until I had a motorbike accident I decided, you know, fuck this, I'm just going to start smoking weed again. I'm taking their prescription drugs. I'm not in any less pain. I'm ill, and now I'm crashing a motorbike, sort of like, so fuck it, I'm going to start smoking weed again. I asked my friend, can you help me get some? Because I've not been smoking it for ages. I've no one I can contact. He decided to help me out, and I realized that all the symptoms from my medication were kind of stopping. So I was like, oh, this is all right. So every day I just carried on using cannabis, not thinking, oh, this is my medicine. I just used it because my body was telling me this is working for me. Eventually I just stopped taking the medicines, thinking, so you know what, I don't feel like I need to take this anymore. And the cannabis was just improving my quality of health. I was on antidepressants, and usually when I stopped taking them, I was getting like these head buzzes and zaps, like serotonin syndrome, that was, you know, really impacting my work at university and my life, and I couldn't focus properly. That wasn't happening now I was using cannabis. I was also noticing that I wasn't going to the toilet as much, my stomach wasn't hurting so badly. I'm thinking, do you know what, like, there's got to be something into this, you know, about this. I'm going to look into it a little bit more. I did the research online, and I, you know, started to come across just how much information there was about people using cannabis as a medicine, personal testimonies, the science, the research into it. Found out there was over 20,000 studies on cannabis as a medicine, and I thought, hang on a minute, I'm being lied to here. You know, I've been told all my life that this is bad for me, and I'm going to end up on heroin, and I'll probably end up, you know, dying because of it. And the reality was, I'd been put on a load of different pharmaceutical heroin, you know, and opiates and morphine and tramadol and dihydrocodone. And if I wanted it, I could go in and ask for it, and I could get it. You know, what's the difference? And for me, I made the choice after I had another flare-up in 2010, just because I couldn't access the right quality cannabis. I made the decision that I was going to, I didn't want to, I basically got told I had 2 years left to live. They wanted to take my intestines out, give me chemotherapy. I was on 16 different drugs at the time. And for me, that wasn't an option, was, to die. I didn't think that that was a good prognosis at the age of 22. Anyway, I had friends through my research that had licenses to grow in America, the medical marijuana card, it's a personal license to be able to grow your own if you lived in a number of states. I think there was about 12 or 13 at the time. There's now 25 that have got access to medical cannabis. They said, just get the hell out of there, come over here, we'll give you access to cannabis oil. Brittany, right here in the crowd, was there in Denver when I touched down in 2011. Her friends basically just said, look, we grow, we've got dispensaries, we grow facilities, come and see what it's like, and check it out, and we'll give you medicine. And they did, gave me medicine. Within a few weeks, I was walking up the Rocky Mountains, had a whole new perspective on life, and I was just like, yeah, like, I know what I need to do now. I spent the next 6 months going around America, California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, sofa surfing basically, getting access to cannabis facilities, dispensaries, the grow ops, working with patients, lawyers, activists, patient advocacy, like every aspect of the cannabis movement that there was, I got a bit of a taste of it. When I came back to the UK, and I did even get offered, come and stay here, live in my second house and grow my plants for me, because everyone, everyone's a caregiver for someone else who can't grow, right? And I love the idea. I said, you know what, that's freedom, but it's not, because I'd be like an illegal immigrant and I'd have to hide. And okay, so I need to go back to the UK and I need to show everyone what access people have got over here in America, and I need to make that so I've got it for myself. So anywhere I go in the UK, I need to know that I've got that access anywhere, and I know there's thousands of other people that are just like me that need access like that as well. So I kind of found my calling a little bit. I was like, oh, if no one else is prepared to do that, maybe that's my job. So I've set about that. I've been doing that for 8 years now. Cheers. So, like the Cannabis Social Clubs, people ask me, so, who are you, what are you? I say, we are consumers. We are the most important voice in the conversation right now. If cannabis prohibition or policy is being discussed and you're not speaking to the consumers, you're not listening to the majority of the conversation, because they're the ones having the experiences out there every day, either with the police, their politicians, the doctors, the dealers, just interacting with people in public, having to hide who they are. That's something that's that experience is worth something, and it's worth a lot. And at the moment, not being listened to too much. And we're normal people, we're healthy people, we're patients, we're young adults, we're parents, we're pensioners, brothers, sisters. A lot of the time, people have been criminalised for cannabis use, and at that point, people discard you a little bit if you've got a criminal record. You can't get a job. You might be denied further education. You can't go over to America and Australia where there is legal access because you've been classed as a criminal over here. So we've got a lot of people within our communities that have been stigmatised and criminalised, and we look out for each other. But we're also caregivers. We've got people who have got sick people in their families that have been denied a prescription, and they need advice, they need help, they don't know where to turn to, they need someone to speak to who's been through this, who's got the experience of growing or setting something up. Because some people don't, there's so much information online, it can be confusing. So we provide a support network for people. We're there for them when they need to, if they've been impacted by the law, if they've just been arrested, what information do they need? But we also give people information. If you do get arrested, this is how you should behave, in front of the police officer. If you're being questioned, you're entitled to a duty solicitor, or you can contact one. Here's a list of ones that we've approved already, that kind of thing. We provide experience about the issue. Like if there's a lot of the time, the media are asking for people to give their stories about this. Every time there's a bit of publicity comes out, they're looking for people that they can add in to a little bit of colour And we often reach out, or the media reach out to us and give us the opportunity of being a voice for cannabis consumers. And at the moment, the discussion is literally, it feels like it's being led by the business side, how much money can be made, and it's not even how many jobs can be given. I mean, if that was the conversation, we'd literally be looking at, oh right, people are involved in this conversation now because jobs is, you know, what people get at the end of it. But that's not part of the discussion. And we've estimated that probably between 8 and, I know there's a big gap between 8 and 20,000, but depending on what level of legalisation we implement in the UK, we could have between 8 and 20,000 jobs within the first year. And those figures can be backed up by looking at the job increases year upon year in the states in America that have legalised it recreationally. I think, I can't remember what state it was now, but there was 37,000 jobs increases in the last 12 months. And, you know, similar kind of state, populations in the States to us. The UK Cannabis Social Clubs also offer like structure and guidance. It's all right, well and good in saying, yes, set up a cannabis social club or grow your own, but if you don't offer people the support and the right advice, and if you're not there for them if something does go wrong, then that's, you know, you've almost forced people to go down a dead end. And we can all learn from each other's experiences. So if everyone's going out there doing their own thing in their own area, speaking with their local communities, their local authorities, that helps us gain a better picture of what's going on nationally, and then we can react to that properly. We can strategize our campaigns. And we are campaigning for the right to grow in the UK. We feel like if they're talking about giving licenses to people to grow, to sell back to us, we need to be able to have the right to grow first. And basically, the UK Cannabis Social Clubs is about creating a policy for people before profit, but also creating a policy that deals with the problems of prohibition before it looks at, you know, how much money can be made out of creating a policy. So if you're always looking at the money side of things, you're not dealing with the problems that are caused where. I think we've seen some of that in Canada. A lot of the grievances that consumers are having are that you can go to prison for 5 years if you've got over 30 grams of cannabis. That's not decriminalisation at the end of the day, is it? That's legalisation with the right, with the police have still got the right to arrest you, put you in prison because you've got 1 more gram than they say you're allowed to have. What if your scales are off? So we feel like a serious discussion needs to be had, and we feel like we're a really big part of a big voice in that. The reason I started the clubs really was I went to my MP. We're a country, we're told by our doctors, go and speak to your MP about this. I can't do anything about it. I can't prescribe. And I went to my MP, and he basically told me his parents-in-law use cannabis in California legally, but and he was fine with that, but he's not going to stand up and support me in Parliament. He didn't think it was a big enough issue for our constituents 8 years ago. Obviously, I didn't take that very nicely. I've done as much as I can to get as much recognition as I can and speak up and tell people about that. But this is the cannabis social clubs are a social solution to a problem created by politics. You know, we've tried to engage with our elected officials. You know, even people that we voted for, we feel like have not listened to us, and we tell them, look, we voted for you, hoping that you would actually, represent us as people, and they still don't care about it. And what else do? You've asked for permission, they're not responding. Maybe you've got to do something about it. You've got to actually act it out. Don't ask them for what you want. Tell them, show them what you want, and then maybe ask for forgiveness afterwards. We've now got 7 police forces around the UK that have turned around and said, do you know what? Don't mind that model, because we structured it, we organised it, and we put it out there for them to look at, and it was tangible. And then we showed them how it could work. We got communities to engage with it. They acted it out. We've had cannabis social clubs on high streets and industrial estates for 5 years now in the UK, where people can walk in, access good quality cannabis at a fair price, and not have to deal with criminal organisations on the streets that are selling contaminated cannabis, or it's being grown by children in houses that have been locked up by Vietnamese gangs, which has been a real issue in the UK for the last 10 years. And I believe it was an issue in Canada before there were so many dispensaries that were providing access to people. When you've got a strong prohibition policy, it creates a brilliant opportunity for criminal organisations to come in and make massive profits. You can make within 3 months in just a small 2 up, 2 down house. You can make £30,000 in 3 months, and you can fit in 4 crops a year. You know, to be able to do that and then use that money for more illicit purposes, that's what the police are really after. Oh, sorry, I've got some here. So our clubs provide a solution to that. They provide an almost a grey area, like the coffee shops in Amsterdam, where they're not criminal organisations, but they're providing a much safer option for people to be able to access it. And the government have said they're okay with that. Our government haven't said they're okay with what we're doing, but we're doing it anyway. You've got to. My other option is death. Like I either sit down and be quiet. And like my family have said, why don't you just keep yourself to yourself, live somewhere out in the country and just grow for yourself, and it'll be fine. Like no, I know way too many people that have done that and they still get caught and they still have to go through it. And who was fighting for them while they were keeping their heads down? Like someone's got to stand up and do something, and that's what the people in the UKCSC are. I've seen, like when I was in America, I saw how people were really gung-ho with their attitude. They were like, fuck this, yeah, we're going to go and beat legalization in the ass. And they did, because they were really oppressed. They got put in prison for years for a few plants, for a stem, for a seed in their car when they got pulled over going from, traveling between states. So they've really realized what they had to fight for. I feel like in the sort of like the 3 strikes and you're out, like this rule that we've got here in the UK, it's sort of like made people feel like, well, let's not rock the boat too much. And we've stayed in this sort of like situation where we haven't caught up with, in America, we haven't caught up with Spain. They've got 1,000 cannabis social clubs in Barcelona now, venues you can walk into. Because when they got busted, they opened up the next day or the next 3 days, and they said, we're not standing for this. This is what our people want. We've got a right to do this. And that's the attitude that I feel we've tried to bring back in the UK. I'm not saying we introduced it, because there were definitely coffee shops here in the UK in the years leading up to us, but there was a lull in cannabis activism in the UK. I just want to tell you one of the stories of our members, Penny. She's a lady around 50. She's got MS. She's a member of the Tottenham Compassion Club. In 2012, when Penny came to us, she was in a wheelchair. She was being pushed around. She was being pushed around and basically needed a considerable amount of help. She was already using cannabis as a medicine, but it was just cannabis she was accessing sort of like here, there, and everywhere. She didn't have like a proper care provider at the time. Upon joining a local cannabis club in London, she was, I think, at a protest or a festival event. She was introduced to cannabis oil, vaporizers, dabbing, different selections of strains, and the community as well. So like she wasn't just being given like some weed. She had access to people that now understood what it was that she needed. Fast forward to 2017, at the Cardiff Global Cannabis March, which was about a 3 or 4 mile walk. Penny walked completely unaided, like not in a wheelchair, not with walking sticks. And she, at the end, it was a really emotional situation. Sort of everyone was like, wow, did Penny just do that? And ever since, she's been at every single event. She's a keen edible maker and a big supporter of the movement, but she's a testament to what a community can do for people in a situation where she's got MS. There is a prescription medicine for MS, Sativex, in the UK, yet she can't get access to it. She's not prescribed it because the care authority has said it's too expensive, yet that medicine is being sent all over the world, to 28 different countries, for people getting prescribed it. I think Wales have turned around and said, we'll prescribe people with MS, Sativex. Scotland's actually got the highest amount of people with MS in the UK, yet they can't get a prescription for it. So it's a bit of a postcode lottery. It's completely unfair. And the NICE guidelines that just come out, like they do take things backwards. GPs used to be able to write a specials prescription for cannabis in the UK prior to November. Now they can't. Prior to November, I forgot what I was going to say then. God damn it. and now prior to the NICE guidelines that came out the other day, like a doctor could write a prescription for it. Now they're being told not to write a prescription for Sativex at all on the grounds of cost. So people with MS feel like things have gone backwards. If you hear what they're saying in the community when they've read that, they're not surprised that's what the NICE guidelines that come out are, but they're still disappointed that that's the case. So I mean, like the whole reason, like we've got licenses in the UK, and what the UKCSC are fighting for are cannabis social clubs to have licenses, register with the local authorities. People can set up businesses without large amounts of money to have to do so. They don't need to be a super rich millionaire to have a cannabis license. But they should be able to grow for their members, and people who are living at home should be able to grow their own in the same way as that we're able to brew beer. If people want a craft beer brewery, they can get a license to do that. If people want a craft cannabis license, they should be able to have the license to do that. So that's what we want to be able to see. We don't want to see people be infringed upon and have their rights taken away from them just so other people can make money, though. But GW Pharmaceuticals were given their license in the UK I think the conversation started in 1994. It was the Liberal Democrats. They were upset that MS patients were being busted in the UK. In 1994, homegrown cannabis had become quite a thing. Sam Skunkman, about 10, 15 years earlier, had come over from America, brought skunk genetics with him, introduced them to Europe and the UK. His name's Skunkman Sam, aka Dave Watson, and he sold his genetics as Hortifarm BV to GW Pharmaceuticals. So GW Pharmaceuticals are growing skunk genetics, literally the breeder of skunk. They've admitted this in New Scientist last year, actually, around the time that the Billy Caldwell campaign came out. They revealed that. So after years of saying we don't grow skunk, we grow medical cannabis, it's revealed they actually grow skunk. Number one, the actual cutting. So, I mean, they were given their license to stop because MS patients were being busted. In 1998, they germinated their first seed. In 2010, they had their first medicine licensed. They've just had their second one licensed in Europe. They've had it licensed in America as well, or FDA approval in America now. MS patients are still being busted in the UK for growing their own. We get called up regularly, but like a couple of months ago, someone was actually called us while the police were in their home. 2 days ago, someone posted on our forum that the police came in and they, rather than taking their plants, they listened to them, they realised, okay, this is a patient, and they walked away. Now, while that's a good thing, that's a postcode lottery, because that's happening in one constabulary. Within the same county, another group of police will go into someone's house who might be an MS patient and bust them, take them down to the station, destroy all their plants, slash their tents with knives, and that's not the situation we need to be in. We need a level playing field. And while we're talking about licenses for pharmaceutical companies, which is literally the only discussion that's going on around the right to grow right now, we're avoiding the fact that there are communities out here providing cannabis for people already, and they're being ignored. They're not being given the opportunity to level up. Like, how do we take these people that are risking their lives, their freedom, to help patients in their communities and help them do it legally? Like, are we ready to do that in the UK? Is the public ready for that? We think they are. And the discussions that we have in the street is, as soon as you tell people that this is what cannabis social clubs are doing, they're kind of on board with it. And we feel like in the UK, we're also in a situation where there's a lot of campaigning that's going on, and a lot of the time they don't realise that there are knock-on effects from this. And I think we've got Paul North, he's going to speak next. We've had this discussion, personally. They've released things like the cannabis street lottery report. They talk about cannabis being 14% THC, I don't know, Paul. And a lot of that has drummed up fears over THC being dangerous and that we need to do something to protect people from the strength of THC. Cannabis THC potency was about 14% back in 1893. We've got cannabis samples that have been tested that show that that's the amount of THC and CBN content in there, which CBN is a degraded version of THC. Now, we need to have an honest discussion about cannabis in the UK. We know that there is more potent cannabis available in the UK than there was before, but that doesn't mean that everyone is having a terribly harmful experience from using high THC cannabis. We've got to understand why they're using high THC cannabis. We've got also stopped the idea that having a cap on THC products is going to be a good idea, because if we cap THC products, that's going to leave a huge black market for high THC products. And if you want to regulate high THC products to control the strength of them, you cannot cap them, because you're literally going to create a market that is going to be, well, Prohibition 2.0. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. If you want to find out more about the UK Cannabis Social Clubs, grab a copy of the quarterly, go on our website, ukcsc.co.uk, and you can come and grab me. I'll be around all weekend for a chat. Thank you very much for having us.